New York City after midnight tasted like rust and rain. Traffic hissed along Canal Street in thin streams, headlights cutting through steam rising from the grates. Storefronts shuttered. The city felt like it was waiting for something to break. 54-year-old Reed Calder stood on the curb outside the community gym where he taught private protection courses. His knuckles still ached from drills. His shoulders carried the memory of weapons he no longer officially held. Most people saw a retired instructor. None saw the history behind his eyes. For 25 years he had been Secret Service, but not the public-facing kind. Reed was the kind they called when someone needed to disappear quietly. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 11:47. His daughter, 20-year-old Tessa Calder, should have texted by now. She was supposed to be at a high school reunion party in Queens. Safe neighborhood. Good kids. He typed. "Where are you?" No response. He tried again. "Answer me." Then a message came through. Not from her. From an unknown number. One photo. Tessa slumped against a chair, hands tied behind her back, tape over her mouth, knees bruised, eyes terrified and begging. Reed's heartbeat didn't race. It narrowed, focused. Became a single sustained note like a sniper's breath. Another message followed. "You arrested our brother. 5 days payback." Below that, a video. He pressed play. Tessa sobbing through tape, surrounded by a circle of masked men. One of them held pliers, another a blowtorch, a third held her hair like a handle. The camera shook with laughter. Reed heard a voice in the background, filtered and confident. "You took our blood. We take yours. 5 days. 5 days screaming." The video ended. Reed's hand tightened around the phone until the case cracked. The city didn't know it yet, but it had just chosen violence. He stepped off the curb, boots hitting pavement with a sound like judgment. His breath fogged in the cold. His body moved on muscle memory, locating exits, counting vehicles, scanning faces. He dialed her number. Voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. He kept walking, toward the subway, toward the part of the city where police didn't answer after midnight unless someone died, toward the kind of buildings that looked abandoned until you learned how many graves they fed. He didn't bother calling the police. He had been the law that operated in places law couldn't reach. He reached. The steps to the underground, pulled the phone up one last time and stared at the photo. His little girl. Broken. He slid the phone into his pocket. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. A train wailed in the tunnel below, lights streaking like a warning. Reed descended. The basement level of the Drexler Hotel was a rumor to most people. A boiler room on paper. A holding pen for debts in reality. Reed knew it from a raid 12 years ago that never made the news. He pushed open the rusted door. Inside, a man sat behind a folding table covered in burner phones. Tattoos ran down his jaw like a confession. He looked up. "Calder?" Reed didn't answer. He just placed the photo on the table. Tessa's photo. The man's smirk collapsed. "I don't want to die," he whispered. Reed leaned in. "Then talk." The man swallowed. "They're not street. They're not cartel. They're soldiers that never made it home right. They call themselves the Vandal Choir. They take contracts, revenge, kidnappings. They like to make examples." Reed's eyes stayed still. "Where?" "They move every 12 hours. Last I heard they were in a warehouse near Long Island City by the docks. The one with red windows." Reed pocketed the phone and turned. The man called after him. "They said 5 days, Calder. 5 days of torture. She might not—" Reed stopped in the doorway. He spoke without turning. "She will, because I am coming." He left the Drexler Hotel with a single direction in his mind and a single truth in his blood. If the Vandal Choir took 5 days, he would take back 5 lives. The city howled as he disappeared into it. He didn't look back. They took Tessa to break him. What they didn't know was that Reed Calder was not a man who broke. He was a man who broke others. Long Island City before dawn looked like a skeleton of steel and neglect. The river wind carried the smell of gasoline and rust, the kind that clung to the back of the throat. 54-year-old Reed Calder stood across from the warehouse with the red windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders loose. mind sharper than the box cutter tucked against his spine. 5 days. They said 5 days. He would not allow day 2 to exist. A delivery truck rumbled by, headlights briefly sweeping across his face. He used that moment to slip into the alley, disappearing into shadow before the glow faded. He crouched by the side door. Old lock. He'd cracked worse locks with a toothpick overseas. 2 seconds. Click. He slipped inside. Dark. Smell of sweat and bleach. Voices ahead. 2 men arguing in hushed tones. Told you not to film her face. Boss wanted proof, not amateur cinematics. Reed moved like a rumor. The first man didn't see him. Reed's arm hooked around his neck, pressure on the carotid artery, the man unconscious before his knees hit the ground. The second spun, knife drawn. Reed parried the wrist with a forearm, stepped in, and broke the elbow against his shoulder, joint popping like snapped cable, then clamped a hand over the man's mouth and guided him to the floor. Not killed, not yet. Answers mattered more than blood. Reed knelt. "Where is she?" The man cried through clenched teeth, answered in gestures. Reed understood. 3rd floor, far end behind black curtains. He didn't thank him. He put him under with a pressure point above the jaw. The warehouse stairs complained under Reed's boots. Memory crawled up the back of his skull. Hallways from jobs that didn't exist on paper. Screams from places Americans pretended were allies. He passed a table, duct tape, chain, bolt cutters. Evidence of routine. Reed's jaw flexed. At the landing, 2 more voices. Boss said she's breaking. He said that's the point. Reed's hand brushed the wall, chipped paint flaking like scabs. Then he exhaled. Slow. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. Movement. He vaulted the corner, grabbed the first man by the collar, slammed him face first into the railing, teeth scattered like loose change. The second reached for a gun. Reed drove a knee upward, the man bent. Reed shoved his head down and snapped it against the step. Silence. Reed looked at the bodies. He remembered being 28 in Berlin and doing this to men for a paycheck, not for family. He wondered briefly what that said about him. Then he stopped wondering. Answers later. Daughter now. 3rd floor. A corridor stretched ahead. Black curtains fluttering like ghosts in the draft. He heard a whimper through the walls. Tessa. Reed moved. Halfway down the hall, a door swung open. A man the size of a refrigerator stepped out, tattoos climbing his throat, nose broken more times than healed. A chain wrapped around his fist. "You're early," the man said. Reed tilted his head. "You're in my way." The chain swung. Reed ducked. It whistled past his ear. Then he lunged inside the man's reach, driving a punch up into the sternum, folding the brute forward. Reed slammed his forehead into the man's nose. Crunch. Seized the chain, looped it around his arm and yanked him sideways into the wall. The man slid to the floor, choking on his own breath. Reed kept moving. He reached the final door, paused, heard breathing. Frantic, scared, muffled. He opened the door. A room. Concrete floor. Single hanging light. Tessa tied to a chair, arms strapped, ankles shackled, tape covering her mouth, bruises turning her skin into a map of suffering. Her eyes found him. They widened, not in fear, in belief. Reed crossed the room in 3 steps and peeled the tape from her mouth. She sobbed, not from pain but from the shock of seeing him, not as a father but as a force. He gently cupped her face. "You're safe," he said. She shook her head. "They're coming back." "I know." As if summoned by her words, footsteps thundered in the hall. Voices. "We heard something." "Check the room." Reed leaned close to his daughter. "Look at me," he whispered. She did. "I need you to breathe. I need you to trust me." She nodded. He placed her hands against the wall behind her, braced the chair so it wouldn't fall, and stepped between her and the door. The first man burst in. Reed didn't speak. He just moved. He grabbed the man by the wrist, twisted and threw the gun across the room before it cleared the holster. Then he pulled the man forward, using his momentum to slam him into the second attacker trying to enter. Bodies hit concrete. Chaos in a bottleneck. Reed seized the gun from the floor and fired 1 shot into the ceiling. Silence. Every man in the hallway froze. Reed stepped forward, voice like winter. "You have 1 chance to leave." Nobody moved. He fired into the wall beside the nearest face. They ran. All of them. Tessa sobbed again. Not in pain, in relief. Reed holstered the gun. He turned back. To her, we're leaving, and then I'm coming back. Saving her was the beginning, because the men he just faced weren't the ones who ordered the torture. The one who did was waiting in the dark, and he knew Reed Calder by name. Reed carried Tessa down the back stairwell, her arms draped around his shoulders, the metal steps clanging under each controlled stride. She was light, too light, as if the fear had hollowed her out. Outside, the Long Island City docks stretched into the fog, cranes looming like beasts frozen mid-feast. The river slapped against the pylons. A train howled somewhere far off, a sound too alive for the dead hours before sunrise. Reed laid Tessa gently in the back seat of his car, checked her pulse, her pupils, her breath, stable but shaking. Her fingers clutched his sleeve like a lifeline tethering her to consciousness. "Dad," she whispered, voice shredded. They said 5 days. It hasn't even been one." Reed brushed her hair aside with a hand that had once broken men like branches. "They don't get another hour," he said. He shut the door, took a breath that burned like ice, and dialed a number he hadn't touched in 8 years. The call rang once. A voice answered. "You're calling me. That's not good." "It's not," Reed said. "Dead or alive favor?" "Alive," Reed said. "For now." A pause. Address texted. "Don't come through the front." The line died. Reed's phone buzzed. A location in Hell's Kitchen, a building that looked abandoned if you weren't trained to see the men on the roof. He returned to the car. Tessa stared at him, wide-eyed, trembling. Fear, shame, trust, all braided together. "Who are you calling?" she asked. Reed turned the key. The engine rumbled. "I'm reopening old doors," he said. He didn't add that some doors only opened if you promised to bleed on the floor. By the time they reached Manhattan, the sky over the Hudson was bruising into gray. Streetlights flickered off block by block like the city refusing to bear witness. Reed parked 2 blocks away and killed the headlights. "Tessa," he said, "listen to me. You're going to a safe place. Someone I trust. You'll stay there until I come back." She grabbed his sleeve again. "What if you don't?" Reed met her eyes. There was no softness in his answer. Only truth. "I will." He walked her into a brownstone that looked like a dead end. The windows were covered. Mail piled near the door. A forgotten building. Reed knocked once, then twice, then waited. Bolts slid. A woman in her 60s opened the door. Sharp blue eyes, hair tied back, posture like someone who could still dismantle a man in seconds. Elora Briggs, former NSA. The kind of woman who didn't lose sleep over body disposal. She looked at Tessa, then Reed. "Last time you were here, you swore you were out." "I am," Reed said. "Until I'm not." Elora stepped aside. "Bring her in." Inside, Reed watched Tessa sink into a couch, pull a blanket around her shoulders. Elora knelt and checked her injuries without asking for permission, as if she had practiced this 1,000 times. Elora looked up. "She needs a hospital." "She needs to stay alive," Reed said. "Hospitals ask questions. Questions get answers. Answers get graves." Elora nodded once. Agreement without approval. "Who took her?" she asked. Reed's jaw locked. "The Vandal Choir." Elora's breath froze. "They're not gang, not cartel. They're ex-Black Ops burnouts. Men who broke under orders. They don't kidnap for money, they kidnap for ideology." Reed nodded. "They recognized you," Elora said. "Or what you used to be." Reed didn't answer. He didn't need to. Elora stood. "Then the one behind this knows exactly how far you'll go." Reed zipped his jacket, adjusted the blade hidden at his spine. "That's why he needs to fear how much further." Before Reed left, Tessa's voice cracked through the room. "Dad, don't become the man they think you are." Reed paused in the doorway. "I became that man so you didn't have to meet him." He stepped into the hall. Elora followed, closing the door softly. "Reed, do not hunt alone. They trained like you. They think like you." Reed stared down the stairwell, eyes already somewhere else. "They don't think like me," he said. "They just think they do." Back on the street, Reed checked the message again. The warehouse in Hell's Kitchen, the place where answers waited. He reached under the seat of his car and pulled out a small duffel, the kind he swore he would never unzip again. Inside, 1 suppressed handgun, 2 spare mags, a garrote made from piano wire, a folded Kevlar vest, a pager from another lifetime. He strapped the vest on. He holstered the gun. He closed the trunk. Then he whispered something the city swallowed. 1 down, 4 to go. He began to walk. And somewhere deep inside the warehouse in Hell's Kitchen, a man with a scar under his eye smiled at a monitor and said, "He'll come. He always comes." Reed Calder was no longer looking for justice. He was looking for the architect of pain, and the Vandal Choir had just stepped into a war they couldn't afford to win. Hell's Kitchen looked hungover, half awake from the previous night's violence. Garbage trucks groaned down the avenue. Steam rose from grate vents like the city was exhaling ghosts. Between the brownstones and bodegas, Reed Calder moved like memory, present but not truly seen. The address led to a building that looked condemned, plywood windows, a rusted fire escape hanging like broken ribs, graffiti layered thick enough to hide the brick. But Reed knew what real abandonment looked like. This wasn't it. He watched from across the street. 2 men stood near the entrance, cigarettes burning, eyes too alert for junkies, hands drifting toward jackets too often. Their posture screamed training. Military, maybe. Paramilitary, definitely. Reed adjusted the duffel on his shoulder. He didn't cross yet. He walked to the alley instead, slipping between dumpsters and loading docks until he found what he needed, a service hatch with a keypad. The keypad was newer than the building deserved. They renovated decay into a fortress. That meant intel. That meant planning. He reached into his pocket, pulled the pager from the old duffel. It wasn't tech. It was a key. Reed touched the back panel, sliding a finger across a strip of metal that should not have been functional after all these years. The pager pinged once, a short electronic cough, and the keypad blinked. Reed typed an override code from muscle memory, a sequence he hadn't consciously thought of since a job in Kiev 14 years ago. The hatch unlocked. Inside, the basement smelled like mold, blood, and bleach. The hum of generators echoed through the ductwork. Somewhere above, men shouted orders over radios. Reed moved through the shadows, each step calculated, his breath controlled. He passed a room lined with chains and hooks, a saw on the table, stains on the floor. He didn't look long. He had learned long ago that cataloging horror didn't stop it. At the base of a metal staircase, he paused. 2 voices floated down from above. Calder's daughter cracked too fast. Boss said not to push yet. Boss ain't patient. He wants the message sent. The agency will find out. A heavy thud cut the sentence short. Reed didn't wait. He bolted up the stairs and grabbed the first man by the hair, slamming his face into the railing hard enough to paint the stairs red. The second reached for his sidearm. Reed drove an elbow into his windpipe, then snapped the man's wrist and took the gun as he fell. The hallway led into a command room. Screens on the walls, feeds from different angles of the city, safe houses, alley intersections, subway entrances. Reed froze. They were watching him. Everywhere he had gone since Tessa disappeared. Every path, every camera, every corner. They had eyes. On one screen he saw footage from the Drexler Hotel basement. On another, Elora's street. On a third, a still shot of Tessa being carried into the brownstone. Reed's pulse didn't spike. It compressed into something lethal. A man stood at the console. Tall, clean-shaven, a scar under one eye, the same one from the warehouse. He turned slowly. "You made it," the man said. "Of course you did. They said you were retired. They lied." Reed leveled the pistol. "Who are you?" The man smiled like a cut being stitched wrong. "You can call me Ravel. We were neighbors once. Same halls, same training grounds, same handlers, different compass." Reed knew the type. Not soldier, not patriot, not mercenary. A believer in his own rot. "You ordered the kidnapping," Reed said. Ravel nodded. "Your daughter was leverage. Pain is currency. And you owed a debt." Reed's grip tightened. "To who?" "To the men you left behind," Ravel said. "The ones who didn't walk out with honors and pensions and quiet guilt. The ones the service disavowed. We were the choir before you ever heard our name." Reed blinked. Not in disbelief. In recognition. He knew them. Their kind. He had seen them in hallways lit by flickering bulbs, strapped to chairs, praying to different gods. He had walked past them. He had followed orders. Ravel leaned against the console. You think you rescue her because you love her. You rescue her because you need her to forgive who you used to be. The words hit, not like a punch, like a mirror. Reed fired. Ravel ducked, rolled, grabbed a metal chair and flung it like a shield. The shot tore through the chair back, sparks flying. Ravel dove behind a server rack. Reed moved to flank, firing 2 shots to keep Ravel pinned. A flashbang dropped into the room. Reed recognized the shape. The pin already gone. He turned, lifted his jacket collar, braced. The flash bled white into the world. The boom rattled teeth. Silence swallowed the edges of sound. Through the ringing, Reed heard boots. Lots of them. He blinked as shapes materialized. The Vandal Choir pouring into the room like a tide of broken men. Reed holstered the gun. He reached behind his back and drew the piano wire. If sound was gone, he would make silence work for him. He stepped forward. He did not hesitate. Bodies moved. Reed moved faster. Wire, blood, collapse. A hand reached for his throat. He turned, drove the edge of his palm under a jaw, dropped the man without breath. More boots. More bodies. Ravel's voice rose above the chaos. Break him, don't kill him, he has to watch. Reed grabbed one of the fallen men's knives. He didn't throw it. He placed it in the base of the skull of the man closest to Ravel. The room froze. Reed faced Ravel, chest heaving, blood on his hands that wasn't his. You think this is debt, Reed said. It's accountability. Ravel tilted his head. To who? Reed stepped closer. To her. Ravel smiled, not in victory but in promise, and whispered, then let's see if she survives long enough to receive the apology. Reed didn't chase Ravel. He moved instead with the precision of a man who knew pursuit was a trap. He grabbed a fallen body, propped it against a server rack, and used the corpse as cover while gunfire split the air. Bullets chewed through drywall, monitors burst like arteries spraying sparks. His ears still rang from the flash, but he counted muzzle bursts by vibration. 3 shooters. 2 reloading. 1 advancing. Reed rolled to the right, slammed his shoulder into the steel console, and used the momentum to slip behind a load-bearing pillar. He fired twice. Center mass, then lower. A knee, a throat. The shapes dropped. The last man lunged. Reed pivoted, caught the wrist, twisted until bones snapped like dry wood. The scream that followed was short. Reed choked it out with the crook of his elbow. Silence. Not peace. Just absence. He wiped his face with his sleeve. Blood streaked like war paint. He holstered the knife. A radio crackled on one of the fallen men. Package is on the move. South route. 2 minutes. Reed froze. Tessa. He grabbed the radio, voice controlled. Repeat. South route. A voice responded, harsh and confused. Who is this? Reed cut the transmission. He sprinted out of the command room and into the corridor. The hallway forked. He chose the right path without hesitation. He recognized the infrastructure, the mall. This place wasn't improvised. It was built, repurposed, like someone had studied federal layouts and copied them from memory. The Vandal Choir were not amateurs. They were echoes of him. He passed a window that looked into a training room. Dummies and restraints. Plywood cutouts shaped like civilians. Phrased orders written on a whiteboard. Restraint is a tactic, not a virtue. Pain is the key that opens doors. Family is leverage. Reed stared. His training looked back at him. Distorted. Rotten. He moved on. Outside, the storm had returned. Rain hammering the asphalt. Wind pitching dumpster lids and loose metal against buildings like thrown bones. Reed burst into the alley behind the warehouse. Tires screeched. A black transit van fishtailed onto the street, back doors slamming shut as it accelerated. Tessa. Reed sprinted, vaulted a trash bin, slid across the hood of a parked car. The van barreled toward the avenue. Reed drew his pistol, fired at the rear tire. The bullet struck. The tire burst. The van veered, skidded sideways through puddles, clipped a streetlight, and slammed into a row of newspaper dispensers. Steam billowed from the hood. One door flung open. A man stumbled out, coughing, reaching for an automatic rifle. Reed didn't give him the chance. A shot to the shoulder dropped him. A second to the leg kept him down. Reed advanced. He yanked the rifle away, kicked the man's jaw hard enough to silence him. He tore open the van doors. Tessa wasn't inside, only restraints and a phone. On the screen, a video call, Ravel's face. half lit by some distant lamp, eyes like polished bullets, mouth like a wound. "You're learning," Ravel said. "But you're late." Reed's hand tightened, knuckles white. Ravel angled the phone, showing Tessa tied to a chair again. Different room, concrete walls, water dripping steadily. Her face was pale, her breath thin. She wasn't conscious. 5 days, Ravel said. That was the plan. A day for every year you failed us, but I see now. You don't need 5. You need the memory of 5. Reed's voice was low enough to bleed. If you touch her again, I will pull the world down on you. Ravel smirked. You already did. We just learned to breathe under rubble. A gunshot sounded off camera. Not at Tessa. A warning. A time limit. Ravel lifted a slip of paper toward the camera. It read, Pier 45, 1 hour, alone. The call cut. Reed looked into the van again. A map was taped to the interior. Pier 45 circled in red. Route lines drawn from different corners of the city. Escape routes. Kill zones. This wasn't punishment. It was choreography. Reed ripped the phone from its mount, pocketed it, and stepped back into the storm. A voice called from behind him. "Reed!" He turned. Elora Briggs was sprinting down the alley, soaked, breathless. Her coat flapped like wings behind her. Somehow she had tracked him here. "I lost them on the street cams," she said. "But I know that pier. It's older than the zoning permits. They used it for offshore extraditions during operations you were never debriefed on." Reed stared at her. She saw what was left in his eyes. Not rage, not grief. Permission. "Don't go alone," she said. "I have to," he replied. "No. They want you alone. Want you cornered, want you desperate. That's when they break people." Reed stepped closer. Rain streaked down his face like ice. "I don't break." Elora nodded, swallowing the fear she didn't want to admit. "Tessa needs you to come back as her father," she said softly. "Not as what they turned you into." Reed looked past her, toward where the city dissolved into rivers of headlights and fog. Toward the pier, toward the ritual of violence waiting for him. "She'll get her father back," he said. He chambered around. "After I bury the men who tried to take him from her." He turned away. Elora didn't call him back. She just whispered to the rain, "Don't become the storm you're chasing." Reed walked. Every step felt like a countdown. Pier 45 waited with answers, with death, and with Tessa. And the Vandal Choir had no idea the last man they should have provoked was already on his way home. Pier 45 jutted into the Hudson like a broken finger pointing at the horizon. Fog clung to the water. Wind clawed at the dock. The city behind Reed Calder looked blurred, as if refusing to watch what would happen next. Reed moved down the pier alone. The boards creaked with each step. He could feel the river beneath, cold and hungry. Halfway down, floodlights snapped on. Blinding white spears cutting through the dark. Voices echoed. Men emerged from the mist like memories with guns. 6 of them. Masks. Tactical gear. The Vandal Choir. Reed didn't raise his hands, he didn't speak. Beyond them, on a platform at the pier's edge, Tessa sat bound to a chair. Hands tied. Feet shackled. A bruise blossoming across her cheek like a storm front. Her eyes opened when she heard him, and even at a distance Reed saw the fear twist into something else. Faith. Ravel stepped out behind her. No mask. Just that scar under his eye, splitting his face like a misplaced exclamation point. He rested a hand on the back of Tessa's chair. "She's alive," Ravel said, "for now. You made it before the clock ran dry. I'm impressed." Reed scanned the positions, 4 on the left, 2 on the right. Distance to Tessa, 20 steps. He spoke, voice steady. "This ends one way." Ravel smiled. "It does, but the ending isn't yours, it's hers." He snapped his fingers. 2 of the men advanced. Reed didn't move. He let them come. The first swung the butt of his rifle. Reed caught the barrel, twisted, drove his elbow into the man's throat, and used the collapsing body as a shield as the second opened fire. The muzzle flash lit the pier like lightning. Bullets tore through the shielded man. Reed shoved the dying body into the second attacker, knocking him off balance, then snatched the fallen rifle and fired twice. 2 choir members dropped. 4 left. Ravel didn't blink. "You taught me this, Calder," he said. "Pain is the tool, fear is the fuel." Reed moved. Fast, angled, predator geometry. He sprinted toward the right flank, dropped to his knees, sliding across slick wood as bullets cracked above his head. He fired from the slide, one shot through a knee, one through a hip, enough to break, not kill. 3 left. He rolled behind a piling, rain and river spray hitting him like needles. A bullet splintered the wood an inch from his temple. He breathed, counted, moved, up and across. He shoved the rifle barrel between slats in the railing, firing blindly at an angle only training could calculate. A grunt, a body dropping. 2 left. Reed rose. The second-to-last man charged with a knife. Reed stepped aside, caught the wrist, and twisted until bone jutted through skin. The knife clattered. Reed shoved him over the rail. A splash. The river accepted the offering. 1 left. Ravel. He still stood behind Tessa, hand at her shoulder, gun at her temple. "You were always better than the rest," Ravel said quietly. "Not because you killed faster, because you never cared who watched." Reed lowered the rifle. Ravel pressed the gun harder to Tessa's head. "No more running," Reed said. "You want me? Then let her go." Ravel leaned down, whispering against Tessa's hair. "Look at him. Beg me." Tessa didn't. Reed did something else. He dropped the rifle and raised his empty hands. Ravel blinked. "You don't surrender," he said. Reed's voice was the quiet of a door closing forever. "I'm not surrendering. I'm showing you the last mistake you'll ever make." Ravel's gun hand trembled just enough for Reed to see the crack in his confidence. Reed stepped forward. "You think you were forgotten, that the service abandoned you, that I moved on, but you don't hate me because I walked away. You hate me because I survived what you couldn't." Ravel's jaw clenched. "Shut up." Reed took another step. "Pull it," he said. "Or put it down." Ravel pulled. The shot fired. Tessa screamed. Reed moved. The bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him. He let the momentum carry him forward. He collided with Ravel. The gun skittered across the platform. They crashed to the ground. They grappled, a tangle of fists and blood and memories that never healed. Ravel slammed a knee into Reed's ribs. Reed responded with a headbutt that split Ravel's brow. Ravel clawed for Reed's throat. Reed seized the wrist, twisted, a snap like a snapped prayer. Ravel howled. Reed pinned him, knee on sternum, rain dripping from his nose. "You will not touch her again," Reed said. Ravel spat blood. "You can't kill me, they'll come for you." Reed leaned closer. "Let them." He drove his palm into Ravel's throat. A final breath, a final silence, then nothing. Reed stood, bleeding, shaking, alive. He rushed to Tessa, untying her, cradling her against his chest. She sobbed into him, her voice small. "Dad, I know," he said, holding her like a promise. "It's over." The floodlights hummed. Sirens in the distance. The river swallowed the last echoes of violence. Elora arrived minutes later, breathless, gun raised, then lowered when she saw the bodies. "You're done," she said, not a question. Reed looked at Tessa. "I am, if they let me be," he said. Elora nodded. "They won't." Reed picked up Tessa, carrying her toward the street, toward whatever life waited. "Then I'll make them." They left the pier behind. The storm passed. The city exhaled. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.